Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the Sao Paulo Grand Prix weekend, a weekend that a lot of us look forward to on the Formula One calendar. It is regularly, this track, this Interlagos track in Brazil, it regularly produces not just great races, but classics, races that you'll remember forever. And obviously last year we had another one of those where Max Verstappen from nearly the back of the grid ended up winning the Grand Prix and pretty much winning the championship in what was an amazing drive in unbelievably wet conditions. And like I said, we've had so many classic races here, especially in the last, say, 25, 30 years. That's what makes this race so exciting, the prospect of what could happen in Brazil. And of course, coming into this Grand Prix, we have three drivers left fighting for the championship. Max Verstappen, the world champion, Lando Norris for McLaren, and the other McLaren driver of Oscar Piastri. And in this 21st Grand Prix of the season, with only 3 races left after this weekend, I really have a strong feeling that this Grand Prix weekend is going to pretty much decide who wins the championship. Of course, it won't officially decide who wins the championship. No one can officially win the championship this weekend. But whoever comes out on top this weekend in terms of whoever scores the most points out of the 3 title contenders, I think very, very likely that person goes on to win the Drivers' Championship. Because this race, if you come out on top here in Brazil, we've seen it so many times in the past, including last year. If you come out on top here in Brazil, it gives you such great momentum for those final, couple races or so after, and can absolutely win you the championship. Again, Max Verstappen last season, a great example of that. Even though he didn't win the championship, Lewis Hamilton in 2021, this was the race, where he won in Brazil. Amazing drive he produced that day to win in Brazil. And that gave him the momentum to close the gap the way he did. And in the end, obviously, was screwed out of the 8th World Championship that he should have won. But again, this race, it does tend to be either a momentum swinger or the thing that really solidifies, or the race weekend, if you get it right, that really solidifies your championship challenge. And so far, it is going the way this weekend of one driver, because we have already had a sprint race in Brazil. The sprint race finished about 2 hours ago. I will go through what the results of the sprint were in terms of the top 8 and who scored points. I will go through that in a moment, and we will touch on in a few minutes' time what the championship standings are now after the sprint, because it has changed around slightly in terms of the gaps between especially the top 3. So we'll get into that momentarily, but yeah, I that's the feeling I get coming into this weekend. Whoever gets this weekend the most right out of those 3 title contenders, I think goes on to win the Drivers' Championship. And of course, only 3 races after this weekend, and it's a triple header, the final 3 races, beginning in a couple of weeks in Las Vegas, and then a week after that, Qatar, and then a week after that, Abu Dhabi. We have got only a month left of the Formula One season, a season that really has turned very exciting in these last few races or few months or so. Hope you guys are well though. Obviously, we've had a couple weeks since the last Grand Prix in Mexico, a Grand Prix that it turned out to be very exciting. I did not think that Grand Prix was going to be anywhere near as exciting as it ended up being. Was probably, as I said in my podcast after the Mexican Grand Prix, was probably the best Mexican Grand Prix we've ever had since we came back to Mexico in 2015. It was a very exciting race. And yeah, it did, though, swing the championship into one driver's favour. And of course, a new championship leader emerged in Lando Norris from that Grand Prix. And yeah, we come to Brazil looking to see whether that momentum will continue in that direction. But yeah, hope you guys are well after, again, a couple weeks of no F1. And I hope you're as excited as I am for what is a massive race weekend. I've been looking forward to this Grand Prix for weeks, and I'm really, fingers crossed, hoping it will deliver, because the potential is massive, I think, for this Grand Prix to be a really great one, this weekend, not just in terms of the race, but qualifying being a really great show as well. And of course, no matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from, I hope you're all having as best a time as possible, given whatever circumstances you may be going through. And I hope you can join me tonight or today or this morning, wherever you are, in watching along and enjoying qualifying in Sao Paulo. And as you can see on the top right of the screen, just over an hour and 20 minutes until qualifying gets underway at Interlagos, a very important qualifying session coming up. And a qualifying session that looks like it is probably going to be in dry conditions. That's not a guarantee, though. We did have some rain earlier for the sprint. It looks like it's probably a 50-50 in terms of whether we'll get rain or not. So we'll have to see. Looking at tomorrow's radar, looks like it's very sure to be a dry race on Sunday. But today, in qualifying, it's really up in the air, no pun intended, as to whether it will be a wet or dry or both, for qualifying this evening. So yeah, cannot wait to get into the session itself. And of course, in the build-up to qualifying, we'll go through the usual stuff. We'll look at what happened yesterday in sprint qualifying, the results, the sector time data, to understand why certain teams are on the pace, why certain teams are off the pace. I'll get into my own predictions. And like I said, in a moment, we will get into what the championship standings are after the sprint race. And then, after reading some of your comments in the chat, we'll then get into the qualifying session in Brazil and see what goes down. But yeah, cannot wait to get into it. As well, quickly, as usual, there is a poll running at the top of the live chat, and I've asked you guys who will take pole position today in Brazil, and the options are Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, and I think Charles Leclerc is the fourth option in that poll. I've not gone for any of the Mercedes drivers, even though they've been pretty fast this weekend. But before I go any further, let's start with what happened in the sprint race. So the top 8 results, Lando Norris took the win after starting on pole from sprint qualifying. And then second, Antonelli. Third, Russell. Mercedes have been very quick this weekend so far. Hopefully they can keep it up. Fourth was Max Verstappen. Fifth, Charles Leclerc. Sixth, Alonso. Seventh, Hamilton. And eighth, probably the best drive of the sprint, was Pierre Gasly, finishing eighth and actually scoring a point in that Alpine, which has not scored a point in God knows how long. I think it's the British Grand Prix was the last time they scored a point, which was, 4 months ago, and feels even longer since that Grand Prix. So, incredible result there for Gasly. But the big story is Oscar Piastri spinning and crashing out of the sprint. And I didn't actually watch the sprint live because I was not actually at home. I was somewhere else watching the football, which was taking place at the same time. I watched back the mistake from Piastri, and it's such a simple, poor mistake. The curb, obviously still wet from the rain that had fallen recently before Piastri, I think on the dry tyres he was on, ran on that part of the track at the exit of turn 2. simply got too much of his tyres on the curb and it spun the car around and he ended up in the barrier. It was a very simple driving error, and that's why Oscar Piastri did not finish the sprint. And given the momentum right now, that might just finish off any confidence that Piastri may have had, coming into this weekend. Obviously, it really has turned on him, this championship battle in the last few races. But this weekend might be not, I'm not going to say it's over for him, because you just don't know, how things are going to play out. Maybe Piastri turns it round and remarkably wins the race and takes back the lead of the championship. That absolutely could happen. But with the way the momentum is going, it really does not look like Piastri is going to win the championship at this rate. And yeah, that is a big moment. Not 8 points lost, but at least 6 points lost there for Piastri, which still could be crucial when we get to Abu Dhabi in a month's time. So yeah, absolute disaster for Piastri. But let's get into what the championship standings now are. And starting on the driver's side, Lando Norris is now 9 points clear of Oscar Piastri. Still close, the gap, even though Norris won the sprint, Piastri didn't finish. Obviously, you only get 8 points for a win in the sprint, so you can't capitalize on a DNF by someone else as much as obviously you can in a race situation. But 9 points clear now for Norris. Piastri still in second. Max Verstappen third. Verstappen obviously finishing fourth in the sprint, giving away 3 points to Lando. So Max is now 39 points behind. And this is a really big qualifying session coming up for Verstappen, because it looks like McLaren in dry conditions are faster. Max has somehow got to get himself in the top 3 on the grid, or top 4, maybe you could say at worst. Because if he doesn't, and Lando, let's say, goes on to win, which he's looking likely to do, given how fast the McLaren looks and he looks. If Max can't get on the podium, which is looking pretty difficult this weekend, given how quick Mercedes are and Red Bull just don't seemingly have the pace, that could really end Max Verstappen's championship chance. So, like I said, this qualifying session coming up in an hour and 15, really, really important for Verstappen, that he at least gets a good grid position. He doesn't necessarily need pole. Obviously, we know that here at this track, you don't need to be on pole to win. You can win from multiple different positions, but he needs to put himself in a close enough grid slot to the McLarens that he can, give himself a good fighting chance. But yeah, Lando Norris, it really has swung his way after the sprint, and he is looking, his chances to win the championship looking even stronger than they looked after Mexico. And then the rest of the standings, you've got Russell 4th, Leclerc 5th, Hamilton 6th, Antonelli in 7th. Antonelli finally breaks the 100-point mark. Antonelli has had a good second half of the season, we must say. Alex Albon 8th still, Nico Hülkenberg 9th, and finally entering the top 10 of the championship, Fernando Alonso. Something that was inevitable. He's been easily fast enough this season to be, in the top 10 of the championship, but some bad luck has really hampered him at times. But finally, he's into the top 10, and again, as I've said, I think in the last couple races, I would not be surprised at all if he finishes at least 9th in the championship, because Aston Martin are pretty competitive at the minute, and Alonso's still driving really well. Alonso's had a pretty good weekend so far, was 5th in the sprint qualifying session, and finished 6th in the sprint itself. So, yeah, Alonso having a good weekend. And then Let's touch on the constructors. McLaren obviously champions from a few races ago. Mercedes, though, after finishing second and third in the sprint, that is 13 points for Mercedes. They are now back into second in the championship. Ferrari third, Red Bull fourth. Williams obviously still comfortably fifth. And then locked on 72 points, both Racing Bulls and Aston Martin. That battle for sixth, hotting up even more. Haas in eighth, obviously only 10 points behind after that remarkable result in Mexico. Still can't quite believe what Oliver Behrman did a couple of weeks ago in Mexico. Sauber in ninth, and then Alpine still last, but they have at least scored a point. It probably will be the final point scored for Alpine, for the rest of the season, but at least they have done something, because they've just been a complete horror show in the last, few races. Pretty much since the halfway point of the season, they've been absolutely nowhere. So good to see them getting a point on the board, even though they are way too far behind the others to not finish last in the championship. At least, though, last in the championship this year will benefit them in terms of wind tunnel development time in the first half of next season. Anyway, that's what the championship standings now look like after the sprint. Let's, though, get into the data of sprint qualifying, because, of course, we're looking at qualifying this evening. So let's look at the data from the low fuel running we've had so far. And Lando Norris, of course, took pole for the sprint. Mercedes, though, were not as quick as McLaren, but they weren't that far behind. Antonelli in second, only a tenth of a second back from the McLaren. Piastri then in third. Russell in fourth. Russell surprisingly disappointing so far, in that he's been beaten by Antonelli in sprint qualifying and the sprint race. You would have expected Russell to be ahead of Antonelli, given that Russell has always been very fast here. Obviously won this Grand Prix 3 years ago brilliantly for Mercedes. So I am expecting even more performance from the Mercedes team, because I still think there's more to be got out of that car than has been so far. That's not to say Antonelli's not doing a good job. He is. But Russell, at this moment, is better than Antonelli. And then, only just by 1,000th of a second, Fernando Alonso was then in fifth. Alonso actually disappointing in the end what he did in SQ3, because in the second part sprint qualifying, SQ2, he did a faster lap time than what he did in SQ3. And that lap time in SQ2, if he had done it in SQ3, he would have been, I think, in the top three on the grid or even on the front row. So Alonso is on absolute fire this weekend. But also, that Aston Martin car is, I wouldn't say surprisingly quick, because I was personally expecting them to be quick this weekend, especially with Alonso at the wheel. He's always been super fast here in Brazil. But I wasn't maybe expecting them to be on that level, they've been so far this weekend. But Aston Martin, without a doubt, are the fastest midfield team this weekend. And we must keep an eye on Fernando Alonso, because if he's at his absolute best and other teams and drivers are not quite at it, Alonso could end up getting a pretty high grid position for tomorrow's race, especially if the weather plays a role. Max Verstappen then is sixth. Red Bull were not at their best yesterday. They did not, I think, show the true performance really of the car. But Red Bull are definitely on the back foot compared to McLaren and Mercedes. There is no doubt about it. Red Bull have, at best, the third best car in, I would say, dry conditions over a single lap. In race conditions, I think you could say probably they've got second fastest car to McLaren. who obviously are the absolute fastest, but again, over a single lap, I think they're probably, again, at best, third in the running order. And they got Lance Stroll 7th. Stroll obviously did not manage to score a point in the sprint. And then Charles Leclerc 8th. Ferrari were very disappointing in sprint qualifying, and even their sprint race result was not great. Again, though, as we'll show with the sector time data, Ferrari did not get the best out of their car in sprint qualifying. There was definitely more pace in that car than what they was shown. So Leclerc, yeah, wasn't great, but there is more in that car, at least, for them. And then completing the top 10, Isaac Hadjar, always in the top 10, pretty much this season. And Nico Hulkenberg in P10. And then the rest of the field, Lewis Hamilton 11th. Hamilton, a bit unlucky, because, I mean, we know he's never really been that good in sprint sessions, but I think him getting eliminated is more because of the Ferrari team not getting the best out of their car, really, rather than, Hamilton performing poorly. So, yeah, that I think that's more to do with why he ended up where he did. Alex Albon in 12th. Williams are definitely better than what they've appeared to be so far. Carlos Sainz, you can see, ended up last and was struggling in the first part of sprint qualifying. I think when it's all said and done, I think Williams do have a fast enough car to be in the top 10. So I think you're going to see quite an improvement from Williams today. And then Pierre Gasly 13th, incredible sprint qualifying. Again, given that Alpine is pretty much the slowest car. Sauber then 14th with Bortoleto. Not a great weekend so far for Bortoleto. Slower than Hulkenberg in sprint qualifying. Then had a massive crash in the sprint. Absolutely massive, where the rear brakes locked up going into turn 1 and he just careered across the track. Thankfully, he's all okay. But, yeah, not great weekend so far for Bortoleto. And then Oliver Behrman in 15th place. Haas nowhere near as fast as they were in Mexico, which I guess we had to expect. Because Mexico was just so incredible what they did there. But I was not expecting them to drop off this badly. They look like they've got one of the slowest cars, to be honest. But we'll see whether they can improve on that for proper, say, qualifying. And then you got Colapinto, Lawson, Tsunoda, Ocon, and Carlos Sainz. So, yeah, that's the rest of the field. But anyway, let's get into the sector time data just to understand why certain teams are faster than others. Sector 1, it's not that important. Sector 1 is basically flat out, except for turn 1 and maybe you could say turn 2 as well, which is, I mean, in turn 2, you're only going to do a small lift through there. So really, it's about your straight line speed and your efficiency in a straight line. And Red Bull, no surprise, the fastest. McLaren, right up there with Mercedes, Aston Martin, Alpine. As you can see, not that big of a gap through the field in the first sector. The only thing really to comment on, or two things to comment on, is one, Ferrari, definitely not lapping at the pace that they really should be in the first sector. They could definitely be at least a tenth and a half quicker in the first sector compared to what they did. Williams as well, I think could be at least a tenth of a second quicker in the first sector. But overall, other than those two teams, I think pretty much the first sector time looking as you kind of would expect. The middle sector, though, really is what makes your lap. And really, not only that, it really showcases who actually has a good car around this circuit. Because in the first sector and the final sector, you can get away with it to a degree by, really having really good straight line speed or getting a really nice slipstream from a car ahead in helping you get a really good grid position. But again, the middle sector really showcases the car's quality. And McLaren, no surprise, the fastest team by nearly a tenth of a second over Aston Martin. Very fast car in the middle sector. And I think that's what really confirms absolutely that Aston Martin do genuinely have a fast car this weekend. It's not just really, quick down the straights. In the corners, they genuinely have a very fast car. And if they can keep this up in qualifying, there's no reason why they can't be mixing it to a degree with Red Bull and Ferrari and Mercedes. Maybe not obviously McLaren, but they could be mixing it with those teams to get some big points. So keep your eye on Aston Martin. Mercedes a tenth and a half back. Not really a surprise, that gap. Sauber, not too bad from them. And then Ferrari, quarter of a second down on McLaren. I think you may be right if you said that, you can't expect Ferrari to be any closer, because we know the McLaren, especially in slow speed corners, and obviously in the middle sector, you've got quite a few slow speed corners, that, McLaren have a much better car than the Ferrari car. But given how short of a lap this is, and the middle sector is only 35 seconds long, quarter of a second is a bit excessive, I feel. So I'm not saying they should be like a tenth or 2/10 quicker, absolutely, but it does feel a bit excessive, that gap. And they got Racing Bulls, Williams, Red Bull, 8th quickest only in the middle sector. Now, they will definitely improve on that. I think Red Bull will be at least a couple tenths of a second faster in the middle sector. But it is clear that in the middle sector, the McLaren, the reason McLaren are faster than the others is because of the middle sector. They're still quick, McLaren, in the other parts of the lap, quick enough, but the middle sector is what is making the absolute difference. And then the final sector is, I wouldn't say useless. It's important, especially if you've got, again, good straight line speed, or if you do have a good slipstream carrying you all the way to the start-finish line. But it's absolutely flat out the final sector. So in terms of, the handling balance of the car, the aero, the chassis, all of that doesn't matter really at all in the final sector. But McLaren were the quickest, and then it was Mercedes, Aston Martin, Haas, Red Bull, Sauber, Racing Bulls, Alpine, Williams, and then Ferrari, the absolute slowest team. Before, though, we get on to what the pecking order is, I think, in dry conditions around this track in qualifying trim. One thing I do want to say is I think both Red Bull and Ferrari have a couple tenths of a second that they can find. So, for example, if Max found that, then he probably would have been third on the grid in sprint qualifying. And for Leclerc, if he had found an extra couple tenths, he would have been at least in, 7th place. It would have been a lot closer to the top 5 than he ended up being. So, if you're a Red Bull or a Ferrari fan, I wouldn't worry as much from what you've seen so far, because I think, again, there is definitely a lot more performance in both of those cars than what's been shown. When I say a lot more performance, though, that doesn't mean to say that Red Bull and Ferrari are as quick as McLaren in dry conditions, because they're not. McLaren have got the fastest car this weekend in dry conditions. In the wet, maybe they do as well. Who knows? But again, in dry conditions, I don't see anyone as quick as McLaren. Saying that, I wouldn't say the gap between them and the rest is massive. It's still close enough where we can get a good, interesting battle. But if I was to pick one team who has the absolute fastest car this weekend in the dry, again, it has to be McLaren. After that, I would say Mercedes second. And then, honestly, I think probably Ferrari and Red Bull are on pretty much the same pace. I think you could swap their drivers around in terms of who ends up ahead and and you'd probably be likely to be correct with your prediction for qualifying. But yeah, I think Ferrari and Red Bull are pretty much on bang on, the same pace, but still not as quick, at least over a qualifying lap, as Mercedes, and definitely not as quick as McLaren. And then after that, Aston Martin, very clearly at least the fifth fastest car, maybe slightly faster. Maybe they can get in that battle with Red Bull and Ferrari, but I think fifth fastest is, I think, where we should put them. And then sixth fastest, I'm going to go Williams. I think so far this weekend, they've not shown their true form in terms of what the actual performance they have for a track like this. So I think Williams will be sixth. Seventh best, Racing Bulls. Eighth best, probably Sauber. And then ninth, I'd probably go Haas. And then 10th, still Alpine, even though they've looked a bit more competitive this weekend. But that is what I think the pecking order is going into this qualifying session. Again, in dry conditions, in the wet. Honestly, who knows? We've seen so many crazy things at this track. I don't really want to predict what could possibly happen in wet conditions today, tomorrow, or in any edition of this Grand Prix. But let me get on to my predictions for this qualifying session. And again, these predictions are based on if it is a dry session. There you go. And I think it will be just about a McLaren front row. Lando Norris taking pole from Piastri in second. And then on the second row, an all-Mercedes second row. George Russell third. I think Russell will be really close to that fight for pole, but ultimately, I think McLaren are just a slight bit too quick. The fourth will be Antonelli. Fifth, I'm going Leclerc ahead of Verstappen. And then seventh, Alonso. Eighth, Lewis Hamilton. Ninth, Carlos Sainz. And then in 10th, Isaac Hadjar, I think, will just about sneak into the top 10 like he does pretty much every weekend. He always manages to find his way into the top 10. So that's my qualifying prediction. Let me know your qualifying predictions, guys, in the live chat, as we have got just under 1 hour to go until the start of qualifying. So for the next, say, half an hour or so, let me know your thoughts. There you go, 56 minutes to go. Yeah, let me know your thoughts going into the session. Who do you think takes pole? What do you think of the fight for the championship now that, we're into the final 4 races? And if you want to ask any F1 related questions in general, make sure to post them in the live chat, and I'll try and answer as many as I can before, obviously, we get into the other parts of the stream and the session itself. Before, though, I get into your comments, just want to say quickly, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because we do qualifying and race watch-alongs for pretty much every Grand Prix. And for this weekend, obviously I'm doing a qualifying watch-along right now. I will be doing a race watch-along tomorrow for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. I'll be live 2 hours before lights out at 3 p.m. UK time. Obviously, the race starting at 5 p.m. here in the UK. Make sure to join us for what is going to be a possibly thrilling Grand Prix in Brazil. And then after this weekend, just 3 more races. So yeah, make sure to subscribe for more content like this, and make sure to smash that like button We are on only 8 likes so far. Let's try and get up to 15 plus likes if we can in the next few minutes. That'd be great if we could do that. Of course, hitting the like button does help the channel grow and help show me that you guys enjoy the content. But before I get on to your comments, I'm just going to have a quick drink and then do a quick channel update for you guys, as it's been a couple of weeks since I spoke to you guys. And then, yeah, we'll get into your comments. So keep them coming in the chat, and I'll get to them in a moment. Right, so throat, thankfully feeling quite a bit better after that. So yeah, before I get on to some of your comments, I just wanted to do a quick channel update because, like I said, it's been a couple of weeks since the last bit of content, and this is actually the first bit of content today that I've done for the month of November. And yeah, we are now in the final 4 races of the season, and content on the channel is going to be between now and Christmas. The best way to describe it is accelerating in terms of the amount compared to, say, the last couple months. So, of course, I'm doing a qualifying and race watch along this weekend, and of course, I'll be doing a podcast on Monday reviewing the race. And then we have 3 races to go, the triple header of Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. For the Las Vegas Grand Prix, even if the championship is super close, I will only be doing a race watch along for that Grand Prix because the timing of that Grand Prix is so bad for us in Europe that, especially with, I've got really important work going on at the minute. Obviously, with my university master's degree, that I don't want to absolutely destroy my sleeping pattern at such a crucial time of the year. So yeah, for that Grand Prix, I will only do a race watch along and will not bother doing a qualifying stream, but I will do a qualifying preview on the Friday night instead of a qualifying watch along. So at least, I can give you guys a preview for qualifying. So that's obviously for Las Vegas, and then for Qatar and Abu Dhabi, if the championship isn't decided after the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and to be honest, I'm not expecting it to be decided until at least Qatar, then the plan is to do both a qualifying and race watch along for both the Qatar and Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which of course then will complete the season. And then the plan between the final Grand Prix, which is on December the 7th, and Christmas, is to put out, I think, 4 videos between then and Christmas. There's like a 2.5 week gap, I think, between then, the end of the season and Christmas. And yeah, the plan is to put out 4 videos, and then there'll be a load more videos coming out in January and February. Thankfully, I will be starting to work on those videos coming out between the end of the season and Christmas. And one of those videos that I will be starting work on very soon is the end of season driver rankings video, which I'm very much looking forward to doing. And I know you guys enjoy debating that. So yeah, that'll be one of those videos. I've got a list written down of the videos I'm going to do, so I just need to revisit that list and remember which ones I'm putting out at particular points. But the point is we've got another 6 weeks basically until Christmas, and between now and Christmas there'll be 4 Grand Prix and then 4 videos covering or end of season content, let's say, covering stuff that, happened in the Formula One season and certain talking points. And then once we're done with the Christmas and New Year period, there'll be a load more videos on certain subjects from the 2025 season, and also some 2026 preview type stuff as well. So yeah, as I said, there'll be a bit more content on the channel in the next 6 weeks than there have been in the previous 6 weeks, if that makes any sense. In the previous, say, 8 weeks, all I've done is race weekend content. But like I said, from now on, obviously we'll be doing covering the final 4 races, but there will also be some extra video content covering or reviewing certain parts or points of 2025. And yeah, hopefully, like I said, I can get out at least 4 videos for you guys between the end of the season on December the 7th and Christmas, and then a load more stuff in January. And of course, the first pre-season test for 2026 is at the very end of January in Barcelona. So we'll be getting started early for our 2026 review type stuff. So yeah, looking forward to it. And who knows, obviously, what 2026 is going to bring us. But just, yeah, quick channel update. That's the plan between now and Christmas. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy that content coming up. Anyway, let's have a look to see what you guys are having to say. And hello to all of you. Hope you're all doing well on what is a quite warm, actually, time of year. Or it's I'd say warmer than usual time of year here in my part of the UK. Hello to Superkev, Seragara, Tarvid Power, Laurie, F1 1244, Herman and Ronan as well. Yeah, hello to all of you guys. Hope you're all doing well. So yeah, let's go through your comments. Tarvid Power asking, will it be a dry qualifying session? Again, I'd have to say, looking at the weather radar, probably a 50-50. I don't think I'm confident enough looking at the radar to say it's very likely to be dry or very likely to be wet. It's a 50-50. And that is really what we want it to be here in Brazil. Because, I mean, we've seen in the past few years when we've had some rain suddenly come out of nowhere and hit the track in qualifying. It's made for incredible historic results. Obviously, Kevin Magnussen taking pole position 3 years ago for Haas, being an example of that. So it's poised nicely, I would say, the weather for this Grand Prix or for this qualifying session. As I said, though, looks like it's going to be dry tomorrow. Very likely dry tomorrow, the race. So if we're going to get any wet weather affecting the running, then it's going to be today, most likely. Laurie Rastogi saying Piastri has been terrible since Monza. I wouldn't say he's been terrible, but his level has quite clearly dropped quite a bit since the first half of the season. Monza, he performed absolutely fine there. Baku, he was absolutely terrible. Singapore, I think really he let what happened at the start of that race affect him way too much. I obviously understand his frustrations from what happened at the start of that race, but I think that's what really swung the momentum into Lando's favour, was that start of that race and the reaction to it. Obviously, in Texas, Piastri, once again, was pretty poor. Mexico, I've got to say, Piastri was poor in qualifying, but I thought he put up a good race performance. It was just, he just could not overtake certain cars as quickly as he needed to, which, yeah, you could say is his fault. It is pretty hard to overtake at that circuit, so I don't think we can fault him too much. He did pull off some good overtakes nonetheless. But if he had passed, for example, George Russell 20 laps sooner, then I think Piastri maybe could have, fought for the podium. But, that's the way it ended up being. And then, yeah, the mistake he made earlier in the sprint was very poor. That is a mistake that a rookie makes. And obviously he is no rookie. But, yeah, there's been a significant drop-off in level, but I wouldn't say he's been terrible. I think there's still been some good shades of performance in there. It's just not as consistent as it was before in the first half of the season. Tomo Paus and Piastri will be back tomorrow. I think that is one thing for Piastri that we must remember is, of course, we've still got qualifying in the race. And if he can turn it around and somehow win this Grand Prix, I say somehow win this Grand Prix, he absolutely can win this Grand Prix. It's not, it's not impossible whatsoever. But if he can turn the momentum around right back into his favour, then this could be the Grand Prix that ends up winning him the championship. So he still has time to swing it in his favour. It's down to him. If he can get the race won tomorrow, then it's absolutely back on. Laurie's saying I would put Russell Antonelli in that pole for pole position. Instead of Leclerc, Ferrari have got no chance of getting pole. Probably, but I don't know. I just think Ferrari, I think they'll... I'm not going to say they'll surprise people, but I don't think they'll be as bad as they were in sprint qualifying. I think they will improve by a few positions in in this session. So regardless, says McLaren want Norris to win it. I want Norris to win it. So come on, guys, make it happen. Super Kev says, I'm excited for the race, but also disappointed with Piastri. I expected him to be cooler, but messed up when it became too heated. That's why what you're saying there, I agree with you. I expect him to keep his cool because he has done so brilliantly earlier in the season. That's why I thought a few races ago that Piastri was pretty much dead on going to win the championship. Because I thought even if there are some difficult moments that present themselves, he'll just, keep calm and get through them on the other side and still look pretty good. But he hasn't. He's not performed anywhere near well enough in these final few races or so if he wants to obviously get the championship won. But again, there is still time to turn it around. Super Kel saying so Chazza is watching Manchester United. I mean, I was more so hate watching Manchester United and hate watching Tottenham. It was a grand hate watch, to be honest. But it was a decent game. Some late drama, but that's why I wasn't watching the sprint because I was busy down the pub watching that instead. But yeah, at least both teams came out disappointed, which is good. Laurie says, thanks to Chancellor for giving Alonso some credit. He is the most underrated driver of the season for me. I wouldn't quite agree with you on that. I'm not sure, to be honest, who I would say is underrated or the underrated driver of the season. I'd probably say underrated driver of the season probably for me would have to be between Hulkenberg and Hadjar. And maybe Behrman as well. I think I'd probably throw in there as having a very underrated season. I know, obviously, Behrman did what he did in Mexico, but if you look at all the other races he's done in the second half of this season, he's really quietly been going about his business quite well and has been consistently on it. So I think he deserves a shout for being or having had an underrated season. Laurie also saying Stroll was okay in the sprint. However, Alonso was much faster and Gasly got past him with the Alpine. It's much slower than the Aston Martin. Yeah, Stroll doing as usual then. Like I said, I didn't watch the sprint itself, so I just looked at the results and made my own assumptions pretty much. But what do you call it? Let's have a look at some other comments here. Herman the Tosser says, I hope Verstappen wins the World Championship. At the minute, it doesn't feel quite like it did a few weeks ago in Texas after that Grand Prix. It really did feel like Max was, I wouldn't say a certainty to win the championship, but the momentum he had and all of that, it really was feeling good from his point of view. But after Mexico and after this weekend so far, it's kind of turned against him, the tide. Not fully, but kind of has a bit. But again, like Piastri, Verstappen, and Red Bull still have time to turn it around and get a big result. By the way, Ronan, hello to you as well. Earlier he said, hi, Jazza, how are you? I'm good. Last 2 weeks I've just been going to the gym, swimming, working out, and this week been working on the first draft of a short film screenplay that we're doing in our first semester for the screenwriting master's course that I'm doing. So yeah, I've just been working on that, and yeah, thankfully last night I was able to finish the first draft, and which was good because I needed to get a first draft done really by last night, and the deadline's in another month. So if I keep just improving what I've already written and making it better and better over the next 3 weeks or so, then hopefully what I finally submit will be good enough to get me some good feedback and a good grade. But yeah, I've only got another month left, and then the first semester's done. And then once my first semester is done, I've then got, I think, 6 weeks or so basically off from uni until the next semester begins. So that's a good break, I have to say. Over a period where you obviously want to have time off, but also gives me enough time off to work on videos for the channel and get content done ahead of time so that when the next semester comes back, I've got ahead a bit. One thing I am enjoying though about uni is the last 3 years I did an FDA course and a BA course. By the way, one really good bit of news today is my certificate, my official bachelor's honours degree certificate, qualification certificate, arrived in the post today. So yeah, that was a proud moment for me earlier. Um, but yeah, the last 3 years on the other courses, we had to do 3 different modules at the same time during a single semester, which made the work on the course very manic, very stressful. What I'm liking about this master's writing course is because it's only one module per semester, there's a lot more time to actually focus on the work and think about it, but also enjoy it. Because on the FDA and the BA courses, you didn't really have time to enjoy your time at uni because you're just constantly having to do stuff and get stuff. Make sure that your work was not too far behind constantly, basically. Well, with this course, it's a lot more enjoyable, and it's a lot easier pace than what I experienced before. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. And like I said, only a month to go until we hand in our first module, and then we'll see. I think we get our feedback for this module in the new year. I think right after about a week or so into the new year, we'll get feedback as to how we've done, and how good our work is and all of that. So we'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, just finishing off my my work for the first module is pretty much what I'm doing at the minute. F1 1244 asking, how much do you think Oscar's crash will affect his qualifying? Hopefully not a lot, but I feel like it might affect his confidence a slight bit, because I mean it's just another bad thing going against him. And that really obviously does not help. If when the momentum is not with you, you've got to try your best to get it back on your side as soon as possible, because momentum in sports is a very powerful thing, and if you have it with you, then you can really achieve a lot. But if you have it against you, only the best, the absolute best, can weather the storm, let's say. Um, but yeah, Piastri has not been able to do that, because ever since pretty much Baku, he has just not turned it around and replicated obviously what he's done earlier in the season. But again, I've said it already a million times on this stream, he still has time to turn it around. And he might be leaving it late to turn it around, but as long as he turns it around and is on top at the very end in Abu Dhabi, then that's all that matters. Ronan asking, do you think Norris could be the worst ever world champion or considered it? In my opinion, absolutely yes. I think there are at least 7 better drivers. It's an interesting debate. I mean, worst ever world champion, you could either debate it in terms of, is Lando the worst world champion in terms of just skill compared to, or quality compared to all the other world champions we've had in the last, say, 30 or 40 years? Or you could look at Lando's performance over the season if he wins the championship and say, yeah, he's won the championship, but this wasn't actually that good of a championship season. It was actually, the worst that maybe we've seen. So, yeah, I mean, if Lando wins the championship, maybe that might be a video I make over the winter break, but who knows whether he will actually get the job done. Ronan saying better than Norris are Verstappen, Hamilton, Leclerc, Russell, Alonso, Hulkenberg, Albon, and Sainz. Not sure I'd go that far, but yeah, I don't rate Lando as highly as others. Put it that way. Uh, Ronan saying good luck with it and well done. I'm doing a Masters 2 at the moment. What are you doing a Masters in? Let me know. And cheers to Laurie. Says best of luck for uni. Cheers. Uh, as well, Ronan asking, are you Maresca in or out? I am Maresca in absolutely all the way. That sounds wrong, but you get my point. Any Chelsea fan that is wanting Enzo Maresca sacked is an idiot. We haven't had a great season. We've had some slip ups, but I honestly think he's doing the best he can with the squad he's got. We don't have a title winning squad. We have a squad that probably at best finishes third or fourth, and that's where I think we will finish. If we could finish in the top four and win a trophy, then I'd be happy with that because we don't have an elite level squad. And you know, after winning away to Tottenham last week, and then most likely winning tonight against Wolves, I think we're absolutely on target for the top four. Which, like I said, it's not what I wanted this season. I wanted us to fight for the title, but we're not title contenders. We don't have the consistency nor the quality to fight for the title. So yeah, top four is the aim, and I'm pretty confident we can finish in the top four, and I think we will. I think it'd be either third or fourth. If we finish in the top three, it will depend on whether City or Liverpool have a bit of a collapse, and don't have anywhere near as good of a season as maybe they were expected to. So yeah, we'll see. But I'm absolutely Maresca in. Maresca's my favourite Chelsea manager we've had since Thomas Tuchel. Yeah, I 100% back the guy. I think he's done. You know, has there been some poor results with him? Absolutely, but I think he's done the absolute best he could have done with this squad ever since he's took over. I don't think anyone. If you, again, I just don't see how you can complain when you look at the actual quality of the squad and what he's achieved with it. If our owners can properly back him and give him the quality players needed, I don't see why we can't win a Premier League title with him. But that's potentially 2 or 3 years down the line, so we'll see. But yeah, I'm absolutely pro Maresca. Anyway, enough football because we have only got another half an hour? No, 25 minutes to go until we get into this qualifying session. Ronan's saying that he's doing a master's in accounting. Good to hear, because from what I hear, that if you get a master's in that type of field, you there's pretty successful pipeline into getting a high paying job. So I really hope that goes in that direction for you. And Rory Jennings wants him out. That guy's an absolute clown. He's at this point, I don't even think that Rory guy. I don't even think he's even a Chelsea fan. He's just like desperately has opinions for clicks. I don't think he believes half the things that he actually says, to be honest. But there you go. Anyway, before we go any further, I'm just going to post a link of the stream out 1 final time. And then we are going to get into this session. So just give me a second. Come join us here to watch along a potential wet qualifying in Brazil. And there you go. Hopefully we'll get some more jumping on to enjoy this session with us. Keep the comments coming, by the way, because we've still got another 20 odd minutes to go, and make sure to keep voting in that poll at the top of the live chat. What we're going to do for the next few minutes is do a quick roundup of the teams and just a quick discussion as to where really all the teams should be aiming for in this qualifying session. And we'll start, of course, with McLaren. And the aim is simple: pole position and the front row, if they can get it. Front row will be hard because the two drivers are not performing at their absolute best. I mean, Lando is, but Oscar isn't quite at his absolute best, I would say. And Mercedes definitely are close enough that they can interrupt things, as we saw in the sprint qualifying. And I think we'll probably see the same today as well. Them getting close to McLaren. But if both drivers are at their best, McLaren should lock out the front row, even though, again, it still will be very close with Mercedes and Ferrari and Red Bull in there as well. If they don't get pole, it's failure this qualifying session if they're not on pole position. Obviously, doesn't mean they won't win the race if they don't get pole, but they really should be taking pole, at least pole, in this session. For Red Bull, if they want Max Verstappen to win the Drivers' Championship, they've got to get him at least fourth on the grid. If he's down in sixth on the grid, which is where he was for sprint qualifying, then I just don't see what he can do from there to really, beat the McLarens or really fight the McLarens even and get the result he needs for his championship. So at least a second row grid slot is what is needed. If they can't get that, then Max is in trouble when it comes to his world championship bid. But as we have seen multiple times, Red Bull do tend to improve their performance from a Friday to a Saturday. Let's see if they can do that today. So yeah, Verstappen, at least fourth on the grid, and he's got a decent chance for Sunday. Next up, Ferrari. Again, like Red Bull, I think there is more performance in them than what was shown in sprint qualifying, and I think they will show more performance in this session. I think they'll be right in the mix around third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. I think in that area. Ultimately, are they pole position contenders? No, not unless we get a really crazy session. But I could see them absolutely on the second row of the grid. They've got a car that should theoretically be pretty fast around this circuit. Remember, they do have normally the fastest car in a straight line, which of course does help you quite a bit here in Interlagos. So keep your eye on Ferrari. They will improve compared to what they were doing in the sprint sessions. But most importantly, out the front four teams, keep your eye on Mercedes-Benz. Not obviously fighting for the championship, but they are the team this weekend that really could scupper the championship hopes of any of the championship contenders, because they've got a fast enough car easily to be on the front row of the grid if one of the McLaren drivers, let's say, is not at their best, like what we saw yesterday in sprint qualifying. But also, they've got, I think, I wouldn't say comfortably a fast enough car, but quick enough to be definitely fighting for the podium. So, Mercedes absolutely could be quite the banana peel in this Grand Prix weekend for the other teams. And again, those championship contending drivers. Mercedes, they are close enough to McLaren to fight for pole. There is no doubt about that. But again, ultimately, if everyone performs at their best, McLaren, I think, get the job done because I think they do have just about a quicker car compared to Mercedes. But as we've seen plenty of times, McLaren's drivers have not been always delivering on a Saturday. And thankfully for Mercedes, they have Mr. Saturday himself in their car, George Russell, who has took some great results here in the past. Obviously, won this race 3 years ago. And if an opportunity is there, George Russell, we know, can take that opportunity. So keep your eye on Mercedes. They really could be that surprise team that, yeah, other than McLaren, gets pole position. Now into the midfield. Aston Martin should be best of the rest. Alonso, I think, really should be at worst on the 4th row of the grid. He could get onto the 3rd row if Ferrari and Red Bull are not quite at it. The Aston Martin car is impressively fast this weekend, especially over a qualifying lap. Lance Stroll, we know he's not going to make Q3. He is still a disaster when it comes to qualifying. Yes, I know he made 7th in sprint qualifying, but that is a case of a broken clock being right twice a day with Stroll. He, will not make Q3. Absolutely no way. But Alonso, I can see him on the 3rd row, and if it's really close, maybe even grabbing a 2nd row grid position. Keep your eye on Fernando Alonso. It's going to be very exciting to watch in this qualifying session. Alpine had a bit of a better weekend, but I still expect them to be the slowest team. If they could, though, get both cars into Q2, I think that'd be a great achievement. Haas, a lot slower than they were in Mexico. I think as well for them, if they could get both cars into Q2, that'd be a good achievement, but they're looking likely at the minute to only just about get one car into the second part of qualifying. Race Bulls, of course, their aim has to be to get at least one car into the top 10, which is possible. It will be close between them, Williams, and Sauber. But if Hadjar is at his best, I think they will make the top 10. Keep your eye, though, on Liam Lawson. Lawson has been competitive here in the past. He finished brilliantly in the points here last year for Racing Bulls and had a decent grid position as well. Keep your eye on Liam Lawson, who I think could really, I wouldn't say grow into the weekend, but I think Lawson could do a lot better than he's done so far. Williams also, I think, like Lawson, could do quite a bit better than what they've done so far. I don't think in the sprint sessions they really showed their true potential. I think they've got quite a bit more in the bag, and I think they will have at least one car in the top 10, most likely being Carlos Sainz. Alex Albon, though, is looking better than he's been performing as of late, which is good to see. But yeah, Williams, I think, will be fine, and I think they'll get a car in the top 10. Even if they don't get a car in the top 10, I'd be very surprised if they don't score at least a point tomorrow. And then finally, Sauber. Keep your eye on Sauber. They might spring a surprise today. Hülkenberg has been in and around that top 10. But also, we have the home driver, Gabriel Bortoleto, in the Sauber, who's got plenty of support in Interlagos. Bortoleto, I believe, grew up on the outskirts of Sao Paulo, so he's a local boy as well. And yeah, fingers crossed he does a good job. I think for Bortoleto, as long as he outqualifies Hülkenberg, he should get a decent grid position. We'll see what that grid position ends up being, but I think for Sauber, most likely, I don't think they make the top 10. I just don't think their car is overall quick enough to do that. But here is a reminder. of my qualifying prediction. And I think Lando Norris will take pole from Piastri second, and then Russell, Antonelli, Leclerc, Verstappen, Alonso, Hamilton, Sainz, and Hadjar rounding out the rest of the field. That is my qualifying prediction, and we'll see whether it will come true or not, as we have got just under 15 minutes to go until we are underway. And there you go. 14 minutes remain for this qualifying session. Again, there is still time to let me know in the chat or in the poll, who do you think takes pole position today? And also, again, let me know who you think will end up in the, say, top 5, top 10. And I'll make sure to read out your predictions before we start. And as well, of course, with that poll running in the chat, it will keep running until the start of Q3, which will be the start of Q3 in about an hour from now. So another hour left for you to make a decision and have the advantage of seeing the first two parts of qualifying, which could help you make the decision and get the prediction right. But let's just read out some final comments. And let's see what you guys are saying. Turbo Power saying, I think that's a bit harsh. Norris isn't a bad driver. He is stepping up when he needs to. I will give him credit that, yeah, in these last few races, he has stepped up and he has performed mostly to the level he should be if he wants to win the championship. I still think there's been the odd race where he could have done better, but yeah, I think you have to credit him, whether you like him or not, that he has stepped up. But can he keep this momentum going until the very end of the season? Because it's great him having momentum in these last 2, 3, 4 races, but we've still got another 4 races to go. If he suddenly loses that momentum, with still another 2 or 3 races left, that could, destroy his championship hopes. Laurie Rostoli saying Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc, Alonso, maybe Albon would win the championship by a larger margin than Piastri and Norris in that McLaren. I agree with the first 4, but I don't think... I think Albon would be a strong championship contender if he was in that McLaren instead of, say, Lando Norris. But I don't think Albon would be any further clear than Norris has been or Piastri was, earlier in the season. I don't think that for a second. Albon is a very good driver. Sorry, just taking a break there to have a quick drink. Yeah, Albon's a very good driver. He's, I think he's absolutely asserted himself now as one of the top 10 best drivers in Formula One. And yeah, he's had a great season, but I wouldn't say we could say at this point he's like a potential world champion. I wouldn't go that far. And it very well may be the case that this season could end up being the best ever season we see from Alex Albon. It could be. Nobody this season is expecting him to be as good as he's been and, beat Carlos Sainz the way he has. Obviously, Carlos has, thankfully, in the second half of the season, finally showed the form we were all expecting all along. But with Albon, this might be the best we ever see from him. Hopefully not, but I get the feeling it very well could be. This year, maybe next year, could be the absolute prime years of Alex Albon, and we might start to see a decline in 2 or 3 years' time. Could very well happen, but Williams, they've had a good season, fifth in the championship. They're going to finish fifth in the championship. They're 40 odd points clear. They're absolutely fine. They're not going to be overtaken by anyone. I am very excited though to see where they're at next season. I think next season, a lot of people are going to be surprised just how good they'll be. I think they'll be, I wouldn't say like regular podium finishers, but I think they'll be regularly finishing in the top 5, top 6 next season. Williams very much going places for, I think, the next era coming up, obviously, in the spring. Good to see Will F1 here. Good to see what you're going to say about what's gone on and what's going to go on, I guess. Laurie saying Lawson hasn't kicked on since 2023. A few very good performances this year, and that's it. Yeah, Lawson has not quite been as good as maybe at this point of his career as we were expecting him to be a couple of years ago. I still think Lawson is definitely good enough to be on the grid, but whether he will actually keep his seat is another debate, because obviously Tsunoda and Lawson are battling it out to see who will be in the second Racing Bulls seat alongside Arvid Lindblad in 2026. But yeah, I think Lawson is definitely good enough to be in Formula One. It's just a case of, is there anyone potentially better who could be ahead of him? Uh, you know, for a seat or on the grid or whatever you want to call it, and that there is that possibility. I think that it is pretty likely that he will not be on the grid next season. That doesn't mean he won't be on the grid ever again. I think there's a pretty decent chance he will be on the grid again if he does not make it onto the grid for Racing Bulls next season. But if we're comparing Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson in terms of who's better, as I said a few races ago, I think Nib said it as well, my co-commentator who I think said it a few weeks ago, Tsunoda hasn't just turned into a bad driver overnight. And we know that Tsunoda has the potential to be a pretty strong midfield caliber driver. So at the end of the day, we'll see what happens. By the way, in terms of tomorrow's race watch along, I am expecting to be joined by Niblo, my co-commentator. That's not guarantee though. Still, the timing of the race is difficult for him, so there is a decent chance he won't be able to come on. If he doesn't come on tomorrow, though, he will definitely be on for Las Vegas, which is a really good time for him in terms of the timing of the race, be middle of the afternoon for him. But yeah, I'm hoping he'll be on tomorrow, but it's not a guarantee. I'll make sure to find out in between this stream finishing and tomorrow's beginning. Anyway, we've only got 5 more minutes. Let me read out a couple final comments, and then we will get into this session. Will F1 says Damon Hill is better than Norris. I think you know my opinion on that. Yeah. And Willifon saying Verstappen would beat Norris by 200 points in the same car. Absolutely agreed. There's no doubt who the best driver on the grid still is, but that's not what's going to decide, I don't think, the World Championship, unfortunately, this year. But we'll see. There's still time for Max Verstappen to take what would be a 5th consecutive driver's crown. Anyway, 4 minutes to go. So let's go through a final couple important bits of detail before the start of the session. Firstly, a reminder after the sprint race of the championship standings. Lando Norris, after winning the sprint and Oscar Piastri not finishing, and Verstappen finishing the sprint in 4th, Lando Norris is now 9 points clear of Piastri in the fight for the championship. Max Verstappen is now 39 points behind. Max needs a big qualifying session here to really get into the fight for the race. Russell then in 4th, just over 100 points off the lead. Leclerc 5th, Hamilton 6th, Antonelli 7th, Albon 8th, Hulkenberg 9th, and Fernando Alonso now in the top 10 of the championship. On the constructors side, McLaren obviously champions. Mercedes after the sprint, after finishing 2nd and 3rd, now up to 2nd in the championship, only 6 points clear of Ferrari. Red Bull in 4th, Williams 5th, Racing Bulls and Aston Martin level on points in the battle for 6th. Racing Bulls still just ahead though, because they've had a podium this year. As start qualifying, by the way, will be delayed. FIA Race Control just notified us about, and I think it's because of some track repair work, possibly. Not quite sure. And then Haas in 8th, 9th, Sauber, and last, Alpine. But let's get into some key details regarding the front-running teams as to their history, their stats around this circuit in qualifying. McLaren, their last pole position in Brazil, of course, was last year with Lando Norris. It turned out to be a disaster of a pole position in the race. And that is their only pole position they have took in Brazil in the last 10 years. The last time they converted a pole position to victory was back in, I think, the 2000s. The last time they won this race, of course, 2012, with Jenson Button. Last year, though, qualified 1st and 8th. Pole's definitely possible. Can they do better, though, with both cars overall? Red Bull's last pole position in Brazil was 2 years ago with Max Verstappen. Red Bull have only had, though, 2 poles in Brazil in the last 10 years. Yeah, 2023 and also 2019, both with Max Verstappen those years. Last year, 12th and 13th they were in qualifying. It was absolutely horrific. Surely it will be a lot better today. For the Scuderia, amazingly, their last pole position here in Brazil was 17 years ago in 2008 with Felipe Massa. Of course, on the famous weekend where Felipe, for a few seconds, was the 2008 Drivers' World Champion. As the session, by the way, has been delayed by 5 minutes, so not a long delay, thankfully. Yeah, that's the last time they took pole at this circuit. And also, I think that's the last time they won a championship, was that Grand Prix as well, winning the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari, since 2005, which of course was 20 years ago, have only taken 3 poles here in Brazil, and those 3 poles being in 2006, 2007, and 2008. So, qualifying record really not good for the team. And last year, it was only 6th and 14th. Surely they could do better than that. Meanwhile, for Mercedes, they've been the most successful team at this Grand Prix in qualifying over the last decade. Mercedes' last pole position in Brazil was 3 years ago with George Russell. They've taken, though, 6 poles in Brazil in the last 10 years. Last year, they got onto the front row with George Russell, a super lap for him to get onto the front row. Lewis Hamilton in the other car ended up 16th. Can they at least get on the front row today, or potentially go one better and get pole position? We'll find out very, very soon. And here we go. Q1 will begin in about 4 minutes from now. And obviously Q1 is a 7 or 18 minute long session. We've already got the two Williams cars parked up at the end of the pit lane. Of course, there is quite the threat of rain still, even though there are some brighter skies over the track. The threat of rain is still quite high. So that's why the teams are keen to get out there and get laps done. Pole position, by the way, yesterday in sprint qualifying was a 109.2. Today, I'm expecting pole position to probably, if it's a dry session, to be probably a late 1 minute 8. So in this Q1 session, I think as long as you do a 1 minute 9 lap time, you should, I wouldn't say comfortably, but you should make it through to Q2. But the gap is going to be very close throughout the field. As you saw with the sprint qualifying results, the top 16, and forget the top 16, the top 15 were separated by 0.7 of a second. That is how close it has got in Formula One. Hello to Yanni, by the way. Good to see you. Good to have you along with us. Make sure, by the way, to smash the like button if you haven't already. Of course, helps the channel in the algorithm. It helps show me that you guys are enjoying the content. As we've got 2.5 minutes to go until the session begins. And there are plenty of different fans in the grandstands. Ferrari fans, Lewis Hamilton fans. Lots of different football t-shirts as well. As there is Esteban Ocon in the garage. People forget Esteban Ocon produced one of the best drives of the season last season at this circuit. Ocon finished second here last year for Alpine. And for a good while, it looked like Ocon was actually going to win this race. But then Max Verstappen made sure to overtake him into the first corner on one of the many restarts we had of this race last year. But what a drive that was from Ocon. One of the best of his career. Ocon's had yet another good season. And I know earlier we were talking about underrated in terms of who's had an underrated season. I think you could throw Ocon in there as well. I think Ocon's massively gone under the radar with a lot of his performances this year. As we're now just under a minute to go until the session begins. As Oliver Behrman is about to be released from the pits. Behrman has made Q3 in the last 3 Grand Prix. And in the current form book, Behrman, you would have to say, is probably one of the top 6, 7 drivers on the grid right now. As we've only got 10 more seconds. As there's only a few cars at the end of the pit lane, so clearly a lot of the teams think it won't rain, at least for Q1. And there you go. Q1 and qualifying overall has begun, where we are going to knock out the 5 slowest drivers, whoever they will be, at the end of the 18 minutes. As the two Williamses, first two cars on track, come out. Carlos Sainz, who has finished on the podium here a couple times. Obviously, brilliantly 2019. Started last and finished third in one of the craziest races we've had in recent memory here in Brazil. Alex Albon has, I think Albon is finishing the points here, but I don't think he's finished on the podium here. Of course, he had a chance in 2019 and ended up having a collision with Lewis Hamilton. A collision that I still think was quite a bit to blame on Alex Albon for leaving the door open for Lewis Hamilton to attack. But it's a debate for another day, as the two Mercedes cars still in the garage. So let's see what these drivers can do. Well, the two Williamses have just come straight back into the pits as if it's a practice session. So that's a waste of time from them. As Nico Hülkenberg, to be fair, the Williamses were on the medium tyre, so not like they were really looking to push that hard. Here is Nico Hülkenberg, who completes the first sector, and his first sector time was pretty slow. That second of the pace that you would want to be doing in the first sector. So this is going to be a slow first lap from Hülkenberg. Remember, 15 years ago, Nico Hülkenberg took pole at this track for Williams in mixed conditions. Lost the lead pretty much instantly into the first corner in that race, but he did come home a respectable 8th. But yeah, 15 years ago, he took pole in Interlagos. As Hülkenberg also pits, as Piastri has completed the first sector, and it's also pretty slow first sector. As Oliver Behrman goes quickest. No idea what the lap time is. As Ocon, his teammate, joins him in second position. And then Colapinto goes third. As Piastri on, a pretty slow-looking lap. As Lawson goes quickest. Piastri is going to come to the line, and he does a 1 minute 11.8, which is nearly 2.5 seconds slower than what he did in sprint qualifying yesterday. So yeah, very slow. Lawson is quickest on a 1 minute 10.5, which is, not quick. I mean, it's not slow from Lawson, but it's nowhere near quick enough. If he wants to get into Q2, he'll have to go at least half a second quicker to even have a chance. As Alonso goes fourth on the medium compound tyre. The tyre compounds this weekend, by the way, the C4, C3, and C2. As Stroll goes even quicker than his teammate. So Stroll up to fourth. Leclerc goes third on the medium. Here comes Lando Norris on the soft, who goes quickest at 1:10.4, which is, pretty slow. These lap times will be improved upon, I imagine, quite a bit later on in the session. So Norris quickest from Lawson, Behrman, Albon now up to fourth, and then Max Verstappen now goes fourth. And then Albon, Leclerc, Ocon, Stroll, Alonso, and Hadjar. And then the rest of the field, Sainz, Gasly, Tsunoda, Piastri, and Colapinto. As here comes Lewis Hamilton, who goes quickest, a 1:10.2. Hamilton on the soft tyre with that run, as opposed to his teammate who was on the medium. Here comes Nico Hülkenberg for a proper lap, and he goes up to third. That is not great from Hülkenberg. But he's up to third for now, but he will drop like a stone if that's the best he can do. So only cars left run are the two Mercedes cars. Gabriel Bortoleto looks like, unfortunately, he is not going to be able to do qualifying, and yet that is pretty much confirmed by looking at his car on the broadcast. After such a big crash in the sprint race, his car is not ready to compete. So they're just going to repair it and get it all set up nicely for tomorrow. So it's a shame, but at least he can just go for it tomorrow. Who knows what could happen. As I said a couple of moments ago, Carlos Sainz finished on the podium here from last on the grid, so you don't know what could happen. And Sauber do have a decently quick car, so some things might be possible. Here comes George Russell. Front end not quite reactive through turn 1 and 2, but he's underway. And yeah, car looked a lot better through turn 4. Now uphill into the heart of the middle sector, where you need a really good, sharp front end. And this is where the Mercedes is at its best. This is why the Mercedes won in Canada, won in Singapore. Tracks like those where you do need a really good, sharp front end in those slower corners. And that's why they're strong this weekend, because that front end has been pretty good all season. As Antonelli, quicker than Russell on this lap so far. They're going to go quickest, the two Mercedes. Well, actually, Russell goes second to Antonelli. As here comes Antonelli, who does go quickest by 0.5 tenth over Lewis Hamilton. So, Antonelli, quickest. Not anymore, though. Oliver Behrman does a 1:09.8. That is a brilliant lap time. And that puts him in a really good position to get through to Q2. Brilliant from Behrman, as Russell is now 4th. We're looking at Charles Leclerc on another lap on the medium compound tyre. Isaac Hadjar improves up to 4th. I understand that Ferrari want to use a different tyre to just save the soft, but I don't really see the point of Leclerc, even though he's got up to 7th. I don't see the point of Leclerc doing this, running on this tyre, because he's not going to get through on that compound. There's absolutely no chance of that happening, as Lance Stroll goes up to 3rd. Alonso goes 4th. Here comes Oscar Piastri, championship leader for the longest of anyone this season, but now he's in deficit. As Pierre Gasly, very impressive lap time from him. He goes 2nd with a 1:10.0. That's putting Gasly right in the mix for a Q2 appearance. As Oscar Piastri goes 2nd. Would have expected him to go quicker than Behrman, but no. Just shows you how impressive of a lap time that is from Oliver Behrman. As Alex Albon goes 3rd. Decent lap by him. As we look at the other Sauber that's in the pits being repaired, is the other one on track. As Hulkenberg has improved his middle sector, but I don't quite know if this is a big enough improvement from Hulkenberg. No, not really. He goes up to 11th. He'll have to improve quite a bit on that if he wants to get through to the next part of qualifying. As Carlos Sainz has gone up to only 15th, but that pushes Max Verstappen into the drop zone. Of course, we've still got about 6.5 minutes to go, so Verstappen's going to be fine. But here is Verstappen starting a new lap. Max has took pole in 3 of the last 5 races. Be amazing if he can pull off a pole position today. But here he is starting his new flying lap. And Max needs to put this, really, I'd say, if he can go just about quickest ahead of Behrman, then I think Max is probably then in a good enough position to get through, as Max goes very deep at turn 9, completely missing the apex. That would have cost him probably 2 or 3 tenths of a second. And yeah, Verstappen does not do a personal best middle sector after going very deep. They'll have to do yet another run after this, get his best time on the board properly. To the line he comes. Where does Max end up? Stays in 16th. So he, in that final run of Q1, he is going to be under pressure. And both Red Bulls currently in the drop zone. With 5 minutes left in Q1. And currently in the drop zone, Verstappen, Ocon, Verstappen, Colapinto, Ocon, Tsunoda, and obviously Bortoleto, we know, is out. So only 4 cars we're looking to get eliminated alongside Bortoleto. As Leclerc in the Ferrari, released from his garage. As Max saying on the radio, "Oh my god, mate, the car and the ride is a tiny bit better, but now sliding in turn 1. So still isn't quite happy with the balance of that car, but if he can keep it all together, who knows what the actual potential is. Here's a replay of what he did in turn 9. And he tried to turn in, and the rear end completely snapped on him. Well, not completely, because then he would have spun around, but massive snap. And that cost him a lot of lap time. If it wasn't for that snap, Max would have gone up to probably, or he would have gone into the top 10, I'd imagine. But now, slowly, all the cars filter back onto the circuit. And it looks like Max Verstappen is going to stay out on track and do... Is he going to do one final run, or is he coming back into the pits? No, he's staying out there. So he is, I would presume, he is charging the battery. As Max being told on the radio, "Let me know if we can help out with the tools." And Max says, "No, I don't really know what to tell you." And yeah, it looks like Max is trying to charge the battery up for one final lap. But if we get a yellow flag or red flag at the wrong time, Max could end up knocked out Q1, which would be absolute disaster. for the world champion. Anyway, here is George Russell, who needs a good lap to get through. Now up into the heart of the middle sector. Yeah, the Mercedes handling well. And looking good, especially on the front end. Traction looks good. And yeah, Russell doing a good enough lap time by the looks of it to get himself through to Q2 with just under 2 minutes left. As Lando Norris goes quickest on a 109.6. That's a lot more like it in terms of the fastest lap times. Russell ends up in 4th place. Still probably should be okay with that lap time, George Russell. He managed to get into the 1 minute 9s, which I think is good enough. Here is Leclerc. Leclerc's on a good lap. He's only a 10th.5 down on Norris after the first 2 sectors. What can he do in this final sector as he powers up the hill in the Ferrari? As Isaac Hadjar goes 6th. And Leclerc goes 4th. So yeah, Leclerc is safely through to Q2. As Ocon has improved up to 15th. I'd be very surprised though if Ocon stays there. As someone else just improved. Don't know who though. As Tsunoda only goes 18th. So Tsunoda is out. What a disaster from Tsunoda, who has been absolutely diabolically terrible this weekend. As Max comes into turn 9 again. Does the snap happen? No, it does not. But you can tell still, even though this Red Bull has improved in the last few races, the front end is still not as sharp as the Mercedes or the McLaren. As Pierre Gasly up to 2nd. What a lap. Gasly is through. Can no Max Verstappen get his way into Q2? Surely he can. No, he doesn't. Max Verstappen has been eliminated in Q1. Oh my goodness. That is one hell of a shock. We knew the Red Bull wasn't good coming into qualifying. We knew they were on the back foot, but that is incredible. Verstappen out in Q1. Let's go through the order. So Norris, as the session is now over. Lando Norris tops the timesheets from Gasly, Behrman, Piastri, Leclerc, Russell, Hamilton, Stroll, Hadjar, Lawson, Albon, Alonso, and Sainz, Antonelli, and Hulkenberg. So those top 15 I just mentioned, all getting through to Q1, but eliminated, amazingly, in Q1, Max Verstappen, Esteban Ocon, Franco Colapinto, Yuki Tsunoda, and Gabriel Bortoleto. I'm just going to let that silence just sit there for a second because I cannot quite myself believe what I have just seen. Again, the car has not been good this weekend, but that was diabolical. That is the first time Red Bull have had both cars eliminated in Q1, I think possibly ever. I can't remember that happening to Red Bull before. Both cars eliminated in Q1. That is amazing. Absolutely amazing. But what that does mean is now a big opportunity. Both Red Bulls out. Big opportunity for those midfield teams to get a fifth or a sixth, possibly, in qualifying. By the way, though, big shout out to both Pierre Gasly and Oliver Behrman. What brilliant laps those two did to get through. Keep your eye on those two drivers. They're both clearly performing at their absolute best today. But yeah, I cannot believe that. And with that, unless a miracle happens tomorrow, I think that right there is quite possibly the end of Max Verstappen's World Championship chances. Again, unless something truly mental happens tomorrow, I just don't see how he can win it from this point. Because most likely he will finish probably, what, 4th, 5th at the absolute best tomorrow, and Lando is probably going to win. And yeah, at that point, championship over, you'd have to say. And who knows if that qualifying result right there, if that is what kills Verstappen's hopes, who knows how long he'll have to wait for a chance to win his 5th World Championship. You just don't know in Formula One. Tony Kart Race saying all the Max fanboys are crying right now. They certainly would not have expected that. Absolutely no one. Even his biggest haters would not have even thought that to be possible. But yeah, the car just simply wasn't there for him. Understeer in a lot of the corners. And not going to be easy tomorrow to get, to come back and get a good result, let's say. But we must move on with the rest of the session. And Q2 should be starting in the next couple minutes or so. And obviously, be a 15-minute long session where we'll knock out the next 5 slowest. Who could possibly get eliminated in this session? What surprises are there around the corner? But yeah, I'd love if someone could find me a stat as to whether Red Bull have had both cars eliminated in Q1 before, because I can't remember it ever happening. Even back like 10 years ago when they were struggling with the Renault V6 power units, I don't think even then it ever happened. So, yeah, absolutely crazy. But as I said, we must move on. And who knows what lies ahead? Maybe even more massive surprises. And a nice mixed up grid, hopefully, for tomorrow's race. As the session going to get underway in about 10 seconds time. I'll sync up the timer at the 14-minute mark. And there you go. Q2 has begun. And we've got some cars coming out onto the track. And I think it's the two Williamses again at the front of the pack. So we'll see what they decide to do in terms of their run plan. Because at the start Q1, they just did an outlap and then came straight back in. Williams were not actually very quick in Q1. They were 11th and 13th overall. And I'll make sure to sync up the timer in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There you go. 14 minutes to go in Q2. Let's see who bites the bullet on this occasion. As we look at Alex Albon, looks like he is starting a flying lap. The quickest lap time in Q1 was a 109.6. So I think the quickest time you'll see in this session will probably be a 109.3. So again, if you can do a 1 minute 9 lap time, I'm pretty confident you'll make it into Q3. But if you're in the 1 minute 10s, even if it's a very low 1 minute 10, like a 110.0, 110.1, you're still running the risk of getting eliminated. So this is going to be a very close Q2 session as Carlos Sainz goes quicker than Albon in the first sector. As Albon through turn 9 into turn 10. Rear end drifting nicely through the exit of turn 10. Now through the final corner of Jim Sao. And now building uphill, flat out to the start finish line. And Alex Albon is 110.3, which is a good first run. Well, I won't say a good first run, but it's a good enough first run. It puts him in a decent position to get through to Q3 later if he can improve by, say, a third of a second on that later, which is definitely doable. As Carlos Sainz came back into the pits, interestingly, even though he was faster by the looks of it than Albon. He's come in, Sainz, for a new set of tyres and for a racing pit stop, as thankfully he doesn't come roaring out of the pits, as there was a McLaren passing. As we've got a few other cars coming out. Hulkenberg, Gasly, Norris. As the skies overhead looking in certain areas look a bit darker, but in certain areas it looks a little bit brighter. It's all over the place, which we love. As I think we are watching Charles Leclerc. Ferrari normally run a scrub set of tyres for the first run of Q2. We'll see with this lap time whether that is what they're doing here. He starts his first run in Q2. A good lap time on a scrub set of tyres would be probably what? Probably a late 1 minute 9, like a 109.8, 109.9 that'd be a proper good lap time on a scrub set of tyres. He's a tenth and a half up on Albon after the first sector, but on the exit of turn 4, absolutely floored the throttle and had a massive rear end snap. And he's had to back off. He really went for that, did Leclerc. As here comes Oscar Piastri, who's continuing his lap. He's not made any big, wild errors. And Piastri, lap looks good so far. I think for Oscar, he doesn't need pole today. He just needs to make sure he's right there with his teammate so that he can have a chance tomorrow. We have seen this season, remember, that Piastri normally gets better in the races, so he just needs to make sure his qualifying is good enough. And Oscar Piastri does a 109.8 and goes quickest. If that's on a scrub set of tyres, that is a very good lap time. Lewis Hamilton goes second. Oliver Behrman goes quickest on a 109.7. What a lap time from Behrman. He is on fire. Yet again, great to see it. Isaac Hadjar goes third. That's a good lap time from him. Only a couple tenths off Behrman's pace. So Behrman and Hadjar, two outstanding drivers at the minute. Once again, showcasing their quality. Alonso goes fourth. Good lap time from him. As Liam Lawson, what a lap from him. He goes up to third, ahead of Hadjar. So both Racing Bulls looking very strong. Here comes Pierre Gasly to the line. Gasly goes seventh. Not bad. Stroll is up to eighth. Here comes Charles Leclerc, who only goes ninth. Leclerc surely on a scrub set of tyres. As here comes Lando Norris, who does a purple final sector but only goes third, interestingly. It's the first time he's not gone quicker than his teammate, I think, all weekend. Here's George Russell, who's 2 tenths up on Leclerc after the first 2 sectors. Again, I'm presuming that Mercedes are on scrub set of tyres as Albon goes up to 7th. George Russell goes third. Meanwhile, his teammate Antonelli, who's really on one this weekend, goes second. Only a couple hundredths of a second slower than his F2 teammate from last year, Oliver Behrman. Behrman and Antonelli first and second. The young guns having fun out there. But what a top 10 we've got at the minute. Behrman, Antonelli, Piastri, Russell, Norris, Lawson, Hadjar, Alonso, Albon, Hamilton. That would be some top 10 if we had that in Q3 later. That's a replay on the broadcast of Leclerc having an almighty snap. And yeah, he just absolutely floored it coming out of turn 4, and the rear end just couldn't cope. As that's a replay of Gasly doing the same at the final corner. A lot of drivers out there are having some really great performances, but I think what's making this so exciting is the gaps between the teams are so close at the minute that it really, we could get a really surprising result. As Russell saying on the radio, got no grip, feels like shit. We're missing something here, I don't know what. Well, he's missing something, but his teammate's not. Antonelli once again outdoing Russell. As we look at Leclerc in the garage, who is in the drop zone, of course, 13th. On a fresh set of tyres, though, I'm pretty confident Leclerc will probably go quickest or be right up there. So, as long as he gets in a clean run on fresh tyres, I think Leclerc will be absolutely fine. But Oliver Behrman, just showing him in the garage right now, what a performance. He was, third in Q1, currently quickest in Q2. Can he keep this up amazingly for the rest of qualifying? As Antonelli there just being stopped at the weighbridge. Obviously randomly chosen for certain cars, as to when they get weighed. And thankfully for Antonelli, he only lost, I think, a couple minutes in that process. But looking at the lap times, I would say, I mean, it's obviously very close, but I'd say the top 7 feel to me like they're safe. So in terms of the cars in the top 10 that really need to improve to get into Q3, it's Alonso, Albon, and Hamilton. And then, of course, it's up to the drivers in the drop zone to try and make their way through into the top 10. But yeah, I think Behrman, Antonelli, Piastri, Russell, Norris, Lawson, and Hadjar, I think as long as they improve their lap times, then I think they'll be fine. As we look at Charles Leclerc, who, amazingly, to me at least, amazingly, has never won this Grand Prix. As here comes Fernando Alonso, starting his final run in Q2. Also, amazingly, Fernando Alonso has never won in Brazil. He's won a championship. Well, he's actually won 2 championships in Brazil, but he has never actually won the race in Brazil. He's finished on the podium multiple times, but he's never took the top step, which is mental. About as mental as the other stat that he's also never won at Spa. As Alonso wrestles the car through turn 10 and 11. He's not improved his middle sector though, Alonso. Could be in a bit of trouble. Needs to improve this lap time by at least a 1/10 of a second to give himself a good enough chance to possibly get through to Q3. And he doesn't improve. I think Alonso's going to be in trouble. As we're looking at Leclerc, obviously not improved his first sector. Hulkenberg goes up to 8th. What a lap from Hulkenberg. And that still might not even see him through, but what a lap anyways. He's gone ahead of Alonso, which I think just shows that Alonso is in deep trouble. As Leclerc done a good middle sector. And this should be good enough to get Leclerc easily through. And it surely is. He goes up to 3rd. Leclerc is into Q3. Here comes Pierre Gasly. What a weekend he's having. Where does he go? 5th. What a lap. He's also having an absolute stonker of a weekend. He's only a 10th off fastest. What a lap by Pierre Gasly. Here's Lando Norris. Purple first sector he's done. Alonso, by the way, now in the drop zone. So Alonso is out in Q2. Very disappointing. As Carlos Sainz is in the pit lane. So clearly, Sainz has a problem. So both Spaniards out in Q2. Very disappointing. Lando Norris, though, has done a purple first and middle sector. Surely does he go quickest? Yes, he does. 109.6. Pretty much equaling what he did in Q1. Still not as quick, though, as what he did in sprint qualifying yesterday, where he did a 109.2. So, I don't know if McLaren are saving that pace for Q3 or what, but yeah. Interesting that they can't, or unable to show that pace so far. As Lewis Hamilton, after the first 2 sectors, half a 10th down on Hulkenberg. It's all down to this climb up the hill. Can Lewis Hamilton make it into Q3? No, he doesn't. He fails miserably and ends up in 13th place. An absolute disaster for Hamilton. 1 Ferrari eliminated. The other Ferrari through, and Lewis just shakes his head and, yeah, just... And even remonstrates with himself as to what on earth do I need to do to get this car to where, he needs to get it to. And I don't believe that Alex Albon is on a lap. So I think Nico Hulkenberg may have just done it. And he has. There you go, Albon is pitted. What a lap by Hulkenberg. He is snuck into Q3 with a stonker of a lap. Great job by him. But let's go through your drivers that have made it through to the top 10 shootout. Lando Norris, Oliver Bearman, Kimi Antonelli, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Pierre Gasly, George Russell, Liam Lawson, Isaac Hadjar, Nico Hulkenberg. And knocked out in Q2, guys, Fernando Alonso, Alex Albon, Lewis Hamilton, Lance Stroll, and Carlos Sainz. So that's both Aston Martins, both Williams cars, and a Ferrari out in Q2. And with so many surprise eliminations today, that is really opening up Q3. Because the only front-running cars you've got left are the two McLarens, the two Mercedes, and Leclerc. So from 6th place down, who knows? Who knows who's going to end up where? At this rate, though, Oliver Bearman is putting in such an amazing performance. He could put himself right up in there in the top 2 or 3. An astonishing performance. Crystal saying a rare average weekend for Max, but let's be real, he's done great getting so close to the championship. Absolutely. Even if he don't win it, he's clearly been the best driver this season. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind about that. I'm just thinking to myself at the minute, can Bearman do the unthinkable and get pole? If he does, then either that car is just turned into an amazing car all of a sudden, or Bearman is a new superstar. It's such a shame, though, if that Haas car has just suddenly become a front-running car, because we've only got, 4 races left. Why couldn't they have shown up with this at the start of the season? Remember in Melbourne, Haas were like 3 or 4 seconds off the pace. Now they're up in the top 3, 4 on the grid. 20 odd races in. So, yeah, it's just mental how their season has gone. But I cannot wait for Q3 because I get the feeling we could have a massive surprise. Right. So, Looney Classic saying in the chat there, it's time for Lewis to go home and rest. He's not going to get any better. I've already made my thoughts clear. There's a link in the chat to a video that I did on Lewis Hamilton a couple months ago where I said it's time for Lewis Hamilton to retire, and I will keep that video up and I'll try, if I remember, to put it on the main page of the channel, because every weekend we have, it just rings truer every time that he's past it, and there's no point at continuing. I mean, he is going to continue. He will be a Ferrari driver next season, but after that, there's no point. There really is no point. But we'll see what happens with that. What I wanted to do was finish up the poll in the chat because we have a clear winner. 137 votes, and I asked you guys who will take pole position in Brazil. 53% of the vote for Lando Norris, 29% for Max Verstappen. Obviously, that can't happen now. He got knocked out in 16th place. And then 10% for Piastri, 8% for Leclerc. And yeah, with Lando Norris, I still think, yeah, it's very likely he will take pole. As long as he delivers his best lap, it should be good enough to get pole. But if he does crack under pressure like we've seen before, we could see something very special in these next 12 minutes or so. And of course, we have seen many surprise pole positions in Brazil. Kevin Magnussen 3 years ago for Haas, Nico Hulkenberg for Williams 15 years ago. As is a replay of Isaac Hadjar having a moment at turn 1 in Q2, and then comes to the radio and says, "What a joke." And yeah, complaining about the rear end of the car. He did have a slight distraction of an Aston Martin slowing down on the inside of the first corner, which wouldn't have helped, but shows you how good that Racing Bulls car is. Complaining about the rear end of it, and both Racing Bulls cars made it through to Q3, so must not be that bad. As we have got about 45 seconds to go until Q3 gets underway. Who will take pole? Will it be the status quo, Lando Norris, or will we get an absolute shock of an Oliver Behrman taking pole or a Kimi Antonelli? Remember, Charles Leclerc has never taken pole at this track. I'm sure he'd love to do it today. Oscar Piastri has never taken pole here. He absolutely needs Piastri really to be on the front row if his teammate is on pole. George Russell technically has took pole for a Grand Prix here before, but that was from winning a sprint race. He's never actually finished first at the end of a proper qualifying session here in Brazil. Nico Hulkenberg, though, is one of the only drivers in the top 10 to have actually taken pole here before. And will that play into his hands to maybe grab a 7th or an 8th or a really big result for Sauber? Remember, Haas and Sauber, Racing Bulls, Aston Martin are still fighting away desperately for 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th in the championship. Vital positions, especially if you're Racing Bulls and Haas, because those two teams obviously don't have the finances that Aston Martin and Sauber do. Obviously, Sauber owned pretty much at this point by Audi, so financially they don't care where they finish, but Racing Bulls and Haas absolutely do. As Q3 has begun, I've missed the syncing up point, sorry about that. I will sync up the timer in 45 seconds from now, but the first car on track is Oliver Behrman, one of the informed drivers in Formula One right now. Can he produce an incredible shock in the next 10.5 minutes? We will find out as he opens the DRS and begins his first attempt in Q3. Looks good through turn 1 and turn 2. Now up to turn 4. What's the first sector time looking like? It's decent. And there you go. 10 minutes remain in qualifying. How will the top 10 shape up? As Behrman hasn't put a foot wrong on this lap so far. Oh, slight bit of instability through turn 9. Car, the front end didn't quite want to go in. Car looked very good, though, through turn 10. That was very slick. And a good middle sector. And has a good exit from Jun Sao. Now begins the run to the line. What's his first lap time looking like? It's a 109.9, which is good, but it is a couple tenths of a second slower than what he has done so far in qualifying. His best time was a 109.7 from earlier, so there is more potential in that car. Hulkenberg goes second on a 110.3. Charles Leclerc does a purple first sector, even quicker than Lando Norris. As Pierre Gasly, only a tenth and a half down on Behrman after the first two sectors. Leclerc, half a tenth up on Behrman after the first two sectors. Here comes Gasly, who goes second. Also, massive shout out to Gasly, getting into Q3 in the worst car, as Leclerc goes quickest by nearly a tenth. Can he stay there, though? Yes, he does, because Lando Norris only goes fifth. Did a purple middle and final sector, but his first sector was so bad that he's only stayed fifth. Liam Lawson goes fourth. Hadjar goes fifth. Oscar Piastri's done a purple middle sector. Can he take provisional pole? Yes, he can. By 0.02 of a second. How crucial may that be? Piastri on provisional pole. Antonelli, though, has just done a purple first sector. Here comes George Russell. Fourth. Behind Behrman. Behrman currently up in third place. Here comes Antonelli. Antonelli a tenth down on Piastri after the first two sectors. Antonelli goes fourth. Still behind Oliver Behrman. What a top 10 that is. And we've still got one final run to go. Lando Norris. We have seen it multiple times this season in qualifying, him failing to deliver when it mattered most. And so far in Q3, he has failed to deliver what we know he can do. And there is a replay of what he did on the broadcast. He locked up into turn one and cost himself probably about, well, according to AWS, nearly 0.9 of a second. As here is Antonelli losing the rear end a bit through turn 9. He caught a bit of curb, which I think spun him round a bit too much. Well, Antonelli potentially could have gone another tenth or so quicker. So still plenty of lap time out there to be found. For Oscar Piastri, currently 0.02 of a second ahead of Leclerc on provisional pole. If Oscar can take pole here and Lando does not end up in the top two, this could be a monumental change in momentum for the championship. As Russell again complaining, saying, I've got nothing on this tyre. And that he doesn't know what to do. Mercedes, I think, would be pretty disappointed if they ended up fourth and fifth. Leclerc, by the way, doing a great job on the front row currently. If Ferrari end up there, they'd be very happy with that. But given how close they are to pole, I think Ferrari will be wanting to go and get it. Remember, Ferrari still chasing that first win of 2025. Ferrari's last win over a year ago in Mexico at the end of October last year. They don't want to be waiting until 2026 for the next one. As the mechanics patiently wait by Leclerc's car. And it looks like McLaren are about to release Lando Norris onto the circuit. They're about to release Oliver Bearman of the Haas garage, and they do. Bearman currently in third. Can he maintain third or amazingly improve on that? We will find out in these final 4 minutes. But if he can hang on to third, what a result that would be. As he comes out onto the Interlagos circuit. Plenty of Ferrari caps and shirts in the grandstands. So if Ferrari can get pole here, there'd be wild celebrations. Remember, Ferrari have not taken pole here since 2008. And that cursed Brazilian Grand Prix for the team. As out comes provisional pole sitter Piastri. These next 3 minutes could decide his world championship. As Antonelli still being held in the garage, Mercedes wanting yet again to go last with their laps like they did in the first run of Q3. Here comes though Oliver Bearman. Let's see what he can do. Can he do the unthinkable? As he begins his final lap of qualifying through turn 1 and 2. Looks okay enough. Now flat out through 3. Down to turn 4. What's the first sector looking like? It's better than Piastri, but not a personal best. As Lando Norris has started his final attempt at pole. Leclerc has done a brilliant first sector, a 10.5 up on Piastri. What a start from Leclerc. As Norris does a good first sector as well. As Oliver Bearman completes the middle sector, he's a quarter of a second down. He's not able to improve. There's no more pace in that car. Can he somehow hang on to third? As Hulkenberg goes 5th. Will he stay there? As Bearman stays 3rd for now. Lando Norris is 2/10 up, but here comes Charles Leclerc, who goes on to provisional pole by a 10th of a second, but will he stay there? Here comes Lando Norris, who was on a super lap. And Lando Norris, by 3/10 of a second, takes what could be pole position. But Piastri's only just started his lap. And he's already a 10th down on Norris after the first sector. That's a really great lap time from Norris. For Piastri, he just needs to make sure he's at least on the front row. But can he do even better and take pole? Into turn 9. Car always washes out to the exit through there as Russell has got back out there on a set of mediums. He's not happy with the balance of that car. Yeah, Piastri nearly 3/10 down on Norris. This is going to have to be some final sector if Oscar's to get on the front row. As Liam Lawson goes 4th. Ahead of Bearman. What a lap. Piastri only 3rd. I told you to watch out for Lawson and he's proven me correct. Here comes Isaac Hadjar. He goes 4th. 4th and 5th for Racing Bulls. But Mercedes are still out there. Russell is on a personal best lap. Gasly has gone up to 8th. Here comes George Russell on the mediums. What can he do? He goes 5th. He splits the Racing Bull cars. Only one more car to come. Antonelli. He's been so quick this weekend. Can he get up in there? DRS opens to the line. He puts it on the front row. Antonelli up to 2nd. And there you go. What a qualifying session here in Brazil. Lando Norris, credit where credit is due after a poor first lap. He delivered in the final lap an absolutely thunderous lap and is on pole for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Can he convert it to victory like he failed to do, or unlike he did last year where he failed to do so, is what I was trying to say. But let's go through the rest of your grid. Antonelli 2nd, keeping up his finishes of 2nd place this weekend. Was 2nd in sprint qualifying, 2nd in the sprint race, 2nd in qualifying. Brilliant weekend from Antonelli, continuing to show that he is truly a special driver. Leclerc 3rd, brilliant effort from Leclerc. I told you guys Ferrari had more in the pocket, and they've shown it. Piastri 4th, disappointing. He just didn't produce a good enough final lap, and that could be very costly. Isaac Hadjar, 5th. What a lap from Hadjar, once again proving why he is the Rookie of the Year. Russell 6th, poor day from him. Lawson 7th, what a day for Racing Bulls. Behrman 8th, and it was the lack of improvement on that final lap which cost him. If Behrman could have found an extra couple tenths, Behrman probably would be in the top 3 or 4 on the grid, but it's the way it is. He's going to be very quick tomorrow, though. Keep your eye on him. Gasly 9th. What an effort from him. Nico Hulkenberg in 10th. And then the rest of the field. Alonso, Albon, Hamilton, Stroll, Sainz, Verstappen, Ocon, Colapinto, Tsunoda and Bortoletto. We have such an exciting grid for tomorrow's Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Make sure to join us tomorrow live for the race watch-along. 2 hours before lights out at 3 p.m. UK time, because this is going to be a very exciting race. Whether it's dry or wet. Looks like it's going to be probably dry. But yeah, what a session that was. It felt like pretty much all the cars today were equal. Absolutely bonkers. But there you go. Let me just start up a poll quickly. Asking you guys who is your driver of the day, and there are so many options for driver of the day today. Who is your driver of the day for qualifying in Brazil? And the driver of the day options are Lando Norris, Isaac Hadjar, I'm going to go Oliver Behrman. Even though he didn't produce that on that final lap, I thought he was very good in qualifying. And Pierre Gasly absolutely has to be in the driver of the day vote. He was amazing. There you go. Let me know who your driver of the day for qualifying is. For me, I'm going to go Isaac Hadjar, driver of the day. 5th. What an effort. And you never know what could happen tomorrow. He could take his 2nd podium of the season. Racing Bulls are right in there. Again, though, full credit to Lando Norris. That final lap was just absolutely brilliant. And, what do you call it? What am I trying to do? I'm trying to find the live timing. That's what I'm trying to do. Because I want to look at the gaps. And yeah, in the end, it was nearly 0.2 of a second between Norris and Antonelli. Leclerc was a further 10th back. Piastri was a further 10th back. Hadjar was only half a tenth away from 4th on the grid. And there was only, from Isaac Hadjar to Nico Hulkenberg, there was only 0.108 of a second covering 5th down to 10th place. That is how mentally close it is. God, I cannot wait for tomorrow. And like I said, multiple options for driver of the day. But for me, Isaac Hadjar, brilliant performance. But if people decide to vote for Lando Norris, that's understandable because he was very good on that final lap as well. And throughout the session, to be fair as well, he was good, except for that final or that first run in Q3. He was exceptional. So congratulations to Lando. And to be honest, looking at tomorrow's race in regards to the championship, Lando Norris obviously has to win tomorrow's race. And if he does, then with Max in 16th and his teammate in 4th, I think there's a pretty good chance that this time tomorrow we will be not officially crowning Lando Norris the champion, but if he can deliver the win tomorrow, I think there's a pretty good chance that Lando Norris will be your world champion for 2025. But we said that last year when he was on pole and Verstappen was down in, what was it, 13th or whatever on the grid. And look how that changed around. You just don't know what could happen tomorrow, and that's why you need to join us in watching along tomorrow's race, because crazy things could very well happen, just like we've seen today. Sorry if I'm having to mute my microphone, or if it goes silent for a bit. I'm just trying to mute my microphone so I can clear my nose a bit. I do have a bit of a cold, so yeah, just bear with me a second. But I think what we're going to do sorry about that. I've got a bit of a sneezing fit. That's why I keep muting myself. I think what we're going to do is read a couple final comments, then finish up this poll, and then come to the end of this stream. Yanni saying Norris will be looking for a job at a bottling plant. Laurie Rastogi says, yeah, Piastri will be nothing more than a number 2 if this form carries on. I have to agree. If Lando Norris wins the championship, Oscar Piastri will never be able to call McLaren his team. Put it that way. But again, still time left to reverse things around. Laurie saying, yeah, Norris did well, but he delivered what the car should be doing, really. I agree to a certain extent that, yeah, Lando, he delivered what the car was capable of. But in terms of the gap between, him and the rest, you have to give him credit for that. In the same way, if you look at the last Grand Prix in Mexico, yeah, the McLaren car was clearly the fastest car in Mexico. But for him to out-qualify I think it was a Leclerc by, I think, 0.3 of a second it was in Mexico. That was seriously impressive because the McLaren was the quickest in qualifying in Mexico, but it wasn't that quick. Lando just did an absolutely exceptional final lap, and I'd have to say the same here in Brazil. Yes, the McLaren car was the fastest, but Lando yet again doing an exceptional final lap. And that's why he's on pole. Along with, of course, the McLaren car being the fastest. Anyway, here's for you guys coming along for tonight's stream. Let me just finish up the poll results quick. As I'm trying desperately not to sneeze. It's really hard. My nose is like literally about to explode. Who is your driver there for qualifying in Brazil? 46% of you say Lando Norris, and then Isaac Hazard just behind, and then Behrman and Gasly. But yeah, guys, make sure to join us tomorrow, again, 2 hours before lights out at 3 p.m. UK time for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix race watch-along. It's a race watch-along you do not want to miss. So make sure to join us for that tomorrow. Cheers for coming along for tonight's stream. And yeah, I hope to see you guys and obviously a lot more of you tomorrow for what hopefully will be a very exciting Grand Prix and could very well be a race that pretty much decides the destiny of the World Championship. Like I said at the very start of this stream, I have a feeling that is going to be the case, that whoever comes out on top tomorrow in regards to the title contenders will end up most likely winning the championship. And I think that will probably be the case. So make sure to join us tomorrow and we'll see what goes down in Brazil. Before you go, though, make sure to subscribe for more content like this because we do qualifying and race watch-alongs to pretty much every Grand Prix. And obviously, we'll be doing so in 2026. The new Formula 1 season just around the corner. Make sure to smash the like button before you go. It does help the channel and helps show me that you guys enjoy the content. But guys, until tomorrow's race watch-along and a very highly anticipated Sao Paulo Grand Prix in Interlagos. Until then, guys, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.